If you want to improve your writing and ability to communicate, then you must always be writing. Hi, I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips. The more you can write, the better you'll get. Now, I have a writing cycle where I'll create an outline, then I'll write a draft, and then I'll either review the draft on a screen or print it out, or I'll run it through like Hemingway app or Grammarly. In the case of the outline to the first draft, there might be a few days. There could be an outline and then a bit of research and then some index cards with some little quick notes or a quick note file, and then a draft and then a day or two, and then we run it through some kind of software. It's done this way because we want to get out the best information, not just words on a page. If you're writing a sales letter, a special report, a lead generation piece, a larger report or book, you want to get the right information out and make sure that it's audience specific. So if I'm going to write an outline can be pretty generic. I may go in and do some audience research, and that audience research will help me fill in the outline. While I'm filling in the outline, I have an idea of what the purpose of this piece is and what our desired outcome of that piece is. As the research comes together, it kind of fleshes out the outline as it is muscle on bone. But you can't stop there. I then take the piece and I might peer review it. I might run it through Grammarly. I might give it to an assistant to read. When I give a piece to my assistant, I have them circle any words that are unclear or they don't know the definition of, and highlight any sentence that's difficult. Now, I'm not asking them to clean up the grammar. I'm not asking them to do anything other than to tell me whether or not they can clearly understand this piece. Another thing I'll ask them to do is to provide any questions that they have. In fact, the ask your question format I use in everything, in my podcasts and all my materials. If you ever don't understand what I'm sharing, I'm open to answer your questions. Now, the reason I do this is because that's additional meat and flesh and contours to go on that outline. And there are times where I may have an outline that's 5, 6, 7, 8 pages long, and I figure out one section, and that section just makes sense, and that becomes a chapter. Or I extract it, it becomes a special report. Or I extract it, it becomes a lead generation piece so that I can get more feedback from my audience. And the document becomes a living piece that is gathering materials like a snowball going down a hill and building up momentum and speed. Eventually, I may publish a 90-minute training video about the outline itself. I might have articles or podcasts about the outline. I may have a frequently asked questions about the outline. All of that comes together, and then I decide what I'm going to do with the larger piece. Now, this certainly beats writing a product from beginning to end and not getting any use out of it. I've talked about this many, many times. The creative mind wants to create. But if you're just creating and you're not producing an audience or collecting a herd, then you're not doing this for anybody. If I don't have any podcast listeners, I would still create the content. However, I wouldn't have that stimulus of somebody raising their hand and saying, hey, how do I get better at writing? Well, if I would just say, you write more, and I don't give you any structure behind that, you're going to be stuck. So again, it's an outline. It's then filling in the blanks, and then it's wrapping those materials up into some kind of draft. Now, the draft itself could be a useful piece of content. If you're doing research for a client, you might find an excerpt that you could create a small case study, just 3 paragraphs, the problem, the situation, and the solution. You might see an interesting tidbit that you could grab, a fact that you could grab and make a press release, the shocking fact, the expert opinion, and the next action. See, formulas plugged into that outline give you material, and what you end up with is a body of work. You can take an outline and turn it into a newsletter series by simply writing an article about each key section. You can turn an article number of articles into a small report. That small report, get 2 or 3 small reports, it turns into a big report or a book. You don't need to write beginning to end. Just simply create one sentence at a time. Now, the cycle where you create and review and then create and review helps you cultivate your writing skills by feedback. Always use a reader. And what I mean by a reader is a small pool of individuals who read your work independent of your creating it. So they're giving you feedback. They're giving you insights. They're asking questions to help you develop the concept and move forward. So a good way to get feedback, let's say you're writing a sales letter, is to take your sales letter draft and digest it into 2 or 3 lead generation pieces, run an A/B split on your lead generation, and then feed those leads into some kind of survey series. What's the biggest challenges you have with such and such? Use Alex Mendosia's ask method. The key here is that we aren't sitting down and committing to a large piece of work or even a large body of work. We're simply writing and improving our skills and cycling through content in order to build an audience. And then as we've built that audience, we're going to make offers to them to test our understanding of that audience. It really is all about the audience. So what's the core concept of your business? Could you write an outline that explains the mistakes, risks, and solutions in your industry? Well, simply doing that, you have an editorial calendar that you can work from for years, and you can simply keep writing around different pieces. Now, one challenge that I've had in the past is that I'll have piles of research, I'll have an outline, I'll have some writings, but I didn't have any of that published. I really encourage you to publish, whether you have a blog or an email newsletter or you have something that is going out direct. Now, a print mailed newsletter is likely the best thing you have if you have a service to offer, because what you can do is that as you write these pieces, you can send them out as letters. Because remember, we're writing for a specific audience. How do you make your writing better? Well, who judges the better? The bigger the audience you have to judge your better, the faster you can excel. Think about Stephen King, for example, a novelist. That same level and quality of writing is happening all over the world with individuals who have no audience. But we don't know about them because they have no audience. We're not part of that audience. Yet Stephen King produces movies, short stories, films. All famous writers today, if you look at their history, they've got essays, they've got short articles, they've got columns, they entered short story contests, they wrote for a circle of friends or a writer's club. You want to write and get your materials in front of people. For a while, I was writing a newsletter and I kept getting feedback that the materials look similar to Jay Abraham or the materials look similar to Dan Kennedy. And I noticed that I wasn't writing in my own voice. I was, in fact, just echoing those things that I've learned, applied, and were excited about. So I was taking someone else's idea and describing how I used it and how it worked for me. And that's great. That's a great testimonial, but that doesn't promote me as a service provider. It doesn't help the end user apply it for themselves. And so when I shift it to more of a focus on solving problems for my reader, I was able to create 500 words, 1,500 words, 2,500 word essays that solve very specific problems, and then I could stack those essays together, and 4 or 5 of those essays became a pretty good report. You add an introduction and a conclusion on it, and it became a pretty good report, and that became successful. But when I look back on my writing for 5, 10, even 15 years ago, I write differently today. In the past, it was more training, it was more teaching and fewer stories. It was very linear. Today, I loop in circles, and I know that's confusing for some, but if I repeat the same topic more than once, you can build on a concept so that your brain can adapt the information better. I read a number of books about persuasion and influence, and then I went back and rewrote my material. So this is the last tip. You've got an outline, you've got some research, you've got a draft, You get some peer feedback. Now you go back and rewrite some works. Second edition, third edition. You start conveying it with this new context. Because here's about the most important tip about writing better is that you become better at communicating. See, writing is just one form of communications. You can take something you wrote and you can present it as a verbal or video presentation. You can make a graphic that represents the outline. There's so much that you can do. In fact, you'll never have writer's block again adopting these methods. If you want personal help improving your writing, getting better results, perhaps you've got a sales letter you simply just want to critique or a review, you can visit me at www.adbriefings.co.uk. There are a limited number of opportunities, especially if you have an affluent or entrepreneurial audience, where my expertise and experience can help you write better. If there's any tutorials that we should cover or any concepts that you have questions about, visit www.adbriefings.co.uk and you can ask those questions. Again, I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefings Copywriting Tips, where we help copywriters, marketers, and business development professionals communicate in such a way to attract customers and create profits. Thanks for listening.